I'm a 30-year-old male who works in a steel factory as a welder while trading fish I catch in my free time as a side hustle whenever I can, though trying to do both has left me nearly broke. Fishing, as it turns out, isn't the most lucrative thing in the world. A shame, really, since I always hoped to make it big while using the scenery on my adventures to take my mind off of life's troubles. My fascination for angling comes from bluegill's shimmer, a small, beautiful lake my family and I used to visit 2 or 3 weeks annually many moons ago, with a rental single-floor beach house not too far off from the side of it, surrounded by dirt roads along with forestry in the back. Our home away from home. It was named that on account of the sunlight that shimmers throughout. I always felt like we were rich, being able to afford a place like this and for so many weeks, but I was wrong. See, we had a deal at the time with Tom, our landlord, a kindly old man getting on in years who agreed to cut the price significantly on the condition that some of the fish caught he could keep, along with telling him of our adventures. Probably because him being so feeble now, it's difficult to move away from his station and see what was out there. Ours was a mutual relationship that couldn't be beaten. Sometimes certain days of the week would yield more fish, thanks mostly in part to the weather, like some perch and the rare walleye other than just the standard bluegill fare. Fast forward a couple decades later, and the place is nothing but a distant memory. All of us now on our separate ways. It lost popularity as time went on, since people started complaining of how difficult it was to sleep at night, on account of the bedrooms being drafty and the vents not doing so much to help. There was also debris in the lake that slowly accumulated over time, disappointing many that their fishing spots were ruined. Considering that Tom probably isn't around anymore, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that bluegill's shimmer is deserted now, left to its own devices, but that wasn't going to stop me. There's been some close calls lately about being fired, since I'd focused too much on making fish hooks during work hours, as it was the only remnant of the place I once held so dear. The blood, sweat, and tears I put in paid off in the end, because now I finally saved up enough to afford taking a month-long sabbatical, quitting once it's over and seeing where life takes me surely on the horizon. The stuffy environment of a welding factory, along with being unable to do what I love, was getting to be too much. The morning to leave arrives, and I make the journey to bluegill's shimmer with a renewed sense of passion, the path to get there ingrained in my memory. Coming upon the dirt road entrance, I find that there's makeshift roadblocks and signs strewn about, probably an attempt to bar trespassers, but they were no match. The lake comes into view as I pull to a stop, and it's surprisingly most of how I remembered it. Nobody was in the vicinity, but it was strange to me how there was any structure here at all. Moss and debris were present, yet there were still sounds of wildlife, and the rental beach house I came to love so long ago was still standing. It must have gone through a renovation of some kind while some families here and there kept it in business. Letting myself in, I met with dirt all over the flooring and the occasional rodent dropping. Nevertheless, I find the cleanest part of the floor I can and turn in for the night, using the extra bedding that I brought with me after setting up my canoe and fishing gear, using the waves to lull me to sleep. I wake up shivering, not feeling as fresh like before. My hands and feet were also looking redder than usual. There were complaints of this place being drafty, but nobody told me that it would be freezing. Oddly enough, it was warmer outside, almost jarringly so as I stumble out toward the direction of my canoe. I come back later with a nice haul, walking around to see what I can clean. I come across the living room, and it of all places looked to be untouched. There were still infestations, but not nearly as bad as where I slept, and other parts of the house I've seen before. I didn't stay in there long after setting my fish down because it was so cold. It didn't even occur to me that my teeth were chattering so loudly because of all the distraction. Though as nightfall came around, the living room was getting more inviting. I don't regret my decision going in there because the balance between cold and warmth from whatever I could cover up with sync together in perfect harmony as I fall into a deep sleep. I'm unable to sleep for long as I'm awakened by a mechanical shifting sound. Eventually my nerves get the better of me, and I start to pace around trying to find the source, but it was emanating from what felt like everywhere, and the volume lessened every time I went into a different room of the house, slowing down to a complete stop once sunlight pours in throughout, signaling that dawn is near. It felt pointless now trying to go back to sleep, so I set off on my canoe, eager to distract myself. However, not even the calm waters or debris of bluegill's shimmer could keep my mind off of how there's more to this place that meets the eye. I groan in frustration when coming upon a spot more heavily condensed than usual. My paddle catches onto something as I try moving away. I throw it upwards in a quick motion and immediately wished I hadn't. There on the tip of it was something white and brittle, flying into my face. I throw it in front of me in disgust and saw it was the skeletal remains of a bluegill. No animal could have done this. It was too clean. That's when a gruesome thought crossed my mind. I look at the debris surrounding the canoe and find them to be more skeletal remains. Some of fish and other irregular shapes that made it hard to identify what they were. But the oddest part of all were how they were clumped together and not evenly distributed. Paddling my way back, I don't feel as safe now as I used to. The shelter that used to be so welcoming now giving off an oppressive atmosphere once I return. No matter what, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Heading into the living room, I wait again until nightfall, and the sound that once eluded me showed up again. I recoil after noticing how cold the temperature is, similar before to nights previous, but not to this degree. Instinctively, I start knocking around, and I could feel that the walls next to the sofa were hollow. But that couldn't be. My heart starts to race as I swiftly kick what's in front of me and a loud, echoing sound ensues. Among the wreckage and splinters was a cave-like passage, leading into what I presumed to be a depth of bluegill's shimmer not yet known to the public. Heading in, I was greeted with feelings of claustrophobia I never knew I had. Jagged walls brushed past my skin with every step until eventually, my foot caught onto something metallic. I groped around in the dark and touched what felt like metal hinges. I strained to pull upwards until my knuckles were as white as a sheet, and finally it gives way, revealing itself to be a manhole opening, accompanied by a light, illuminating the area just barely enough for me to get my footing as I climb cautiously into the abyss. My feet eventually touch the bottom, and I see I'm inside a narrow hallway with a wooden door at the end. There was a nauseating metallic smell that hit my nostrils the instant I stepped closer to it. The knob also had a very sticky, dry, crumbly feeling to it as I slowly pushed my way into an open labyrinthine expanse, made up of multiple shelves and wooden cabinets, with only the ceiling above to guide me. I skulked through with trepidation, using a lone thumbtack on the floor to mark where I had been before. Easier said than done because the architecture constantly stole my attention. But most interesting of all were the different fish I found. Some were plastered on the wall in sequence, with eyes that looked like they could see right through your soul, following me no matter where I went. There were plaques close by to every one of them, presumably to see what kind they were. But then I come across something interesting. A plaque that read, "Special Catches," but the podiums they're supposed to be on were vacant. I take a step back and feel a pressure plate go off beneath my feet. I see a trapdoor open up central to them, with an elevator contraption emerging from it. Multiple hard-to-make-out items strewn about on the platform that was now going upwards towards the ceiling, changing direction to go opposite the way I came in from. I follow closely while admiring the winding hallways, fish, and shelves that have seen better days. It almost felt like it was guiding me through a tour of the depths. However, my admiration turned to apprehension as the already dim lighting started darkening with every step I took. The contraption suddenly screeches to a halt, swinging front to back above me as I walk into a secluded area with a large furnace next to some mahogany cabinets to the left of me. There were also tables with a cutting board on each, opposite of them, surrounded by rusted chains that were swaying aimlessly. I go closer towards the back and see a large chair central to them, like what one would usually see in a dentist's office. Goosebumps spread throughout my body when seeing that there were metal restraints in each of its corners, caked with dried blood. Behind it was a dirty tub-like sink with a wide drain. I walk there to get a closer look, and suddenly feel a small object hit my head and fall into the container in front of me. Looking in the direction it came from, I could see it was from the contraption, still swinging above me, now throwing objects of varying sizes that were hanging on its edge since it started to move. I grab the largest one I can from the sink, and my fight or flight response kicks in immediately. This was a severed arm I was holding. How fresh it was, I didn't know. My eyes frantically dart around in fear, looking at what I now realized were multiple human body parts of varying sizes. Then I fixate on a cabinet in the reflection, now ajar, with the door slamming shut the instant I looked at it. But not before I saw the unmistakable metallic glint of a machete receding into the shadows. I back away slowly to hopefully not show that I've seen whoever was trying so desperately to keep themselves hidden, shuddering as the chains I saw before brushed against my skin. But I start sprinting once I get to the path, seeing the markings I put down previously, not caring about how much of a mess I made after sprinting. The narrow hallway and ladder come into view and I quickly climb, adrenaline pushing me through. I run outside as I hear the roaches and rodents inside the shelter scatter and floor it when I get into my vehicle. As I'm driving away, I see the silhouette of an older man on the porch leering at me, machete in hand, calmly watching me as I go past. My mental state is never going to be the same, but if it weren't for my quick thinking, I'm sure I would have met the same fate as one of those victims. To the person who ruined what was once my sanctuary, I hope for your and my sake that we never meet again.